I met B.K.S. Iyengar, already, of course, a renowned yoga teacher, perhaps the most renowned yoga teacher, in 1981. It was very early, maybe February or so, in 81. And I was a Buddhist monk at the time. I'd been for quite some years already. And I had traveled to India the second time in 1980. In fact, I was invited by the Dalai Lama to come and meditate under his guidance. So I went into a 5-month retreat up in the Himalayas above Dharamsala, India, and I was meditating in strict retreat under the Dalai Lama's guidance. Then my visa ran out, and I could not get it extended, so I went down to Sri Lanka and meditated there. I had an extraordinary teacher there, Ananda Maitreya, Balagota Ananda Maitreya, a wonderful Theravada monk. He became my teacher there. But in the course of my meditation there, some kind of physiological imbalances in prana, or the energy system, the nervous system within the body, just became kind of disclosed. They weren't so much created, but unveiled through this deepening meditative practice that I was doing. And I went for acupuncture in Colombo in Sri Lanka, didn't get much help. And so I consulted with my teacher, I looked around and I thought, well, who really knows the body very, very well? And is also can help, maybe therapeutically, balance out certain imbalances in the body. And I already knew about Iyengar, but I learned then that he had his yoga center in this very cultured city of Pune in the south of India. And so I thought, well, this is a bodily problem, a physiological problem, and Buddhism does not have a whole lot to offer in terms of asanas and kind of really dealing with physiological imbalances in terms of Buddhism per se. And so I decided, well, let's go check it out. And so very early, basically the winter of 1981, about February or so, then I came up from Sri Lanka up to Pune, made a beeline for Pune. And as a Buddhist monk, I took lodging in a Christian ashram and spent my days in the Hindu yoga center. So I was definitely very eclectic. And I had the good fortune, he was quite renowned at that time, but not as renowned as he was 10, 20, 30 years later. I guess not quite 30 years yet. But he was still accessible. So I just moved into Pune and got myself a bicycle. And the only reason I was there was to learn yoga. And so I started taking his course and took one course after another, introduced myself to him. I received a fair amount of one-on-one instruction, guidance from him to try to balance out the problem in my body. I was practicing there up to 5 hours a day. I think the classes were maybe an hour and a half. His two children, I can't remember, it was a woman.
Gita and Prashant.
They were both there at that time, and so they were in the classes. And so I was very impressed by his extraordinary precision, his insight, his knowledge, his utter confidence. He was a master. He was like a Yehudi Menuhin of yoga. I mean, he knew his discipline so well. In fact, I think there was even some encounter between the two. But he was a master of his discipline. And so I had listened to him very carefully and practiced assiduously, again up to 5 hours a day, and continued practicing. I'm still practicing yoga to this day. But among the many kind of offerings or gifts, I should say gifts, that he granted me during this time, in addition to all the wide variety of asanas that he taught, and I was practicing up to 3 hours a day for quite a long time after that, he impressed upon me, among other things, was the value of the shavasana, the corpse position. And so after you've done all the other asanas, and some of them very, very demanding, really pushing your limits, and he was there, as everybody knows, a very stern teacher, very strict, very strong. But at the end, then you lie down in the shavasana. Well, it'd be very easy for a Westerner or almost anyone to say, oh, good, you're finished your work, now just lie down and rest, like it's just a vacation time. But he taught the shavasana with all the precision and all the seriousness that he taught even the most advanced, difficult asanas, and he did not teach the shavasana as an easy posture. Now one can say, what's easier than lying down on your back with your arms out to the side? Well, the coarse physical posture, that's quite true, that's not hard. You lie down in a straight line, the arms about 30 degrees out from the torso, the palms up, hit the head on a little cushion. So the physical posture itself, of course, is easy. But the shavasana is not simply a placement of the body. It's also a meditative discipline. It's right on the cusp between asana practice and meditation practice. And so he taught now, in that position, now what do you do with the mind? Well, you bring the mind right into the present moment. And you put the mind in shavasana. You settle the mind in the body, quiet, not reacting, not cogitating, not hoping, not fearing, not remembering or planning. All of that maybe later. But now this is your full-time practice. There's nothing else to do except for now be in the Shavasana. And he said, and I remember this vividly to this day, he said, if you want to meditate, sitting upright in the Padmasana, or some other formal meditative posture sitting cross-legged, he said, all very well, but first you master Shavasana. Because if you can't master Shavasana, then meditation in the cross-legged position, you're not ready for it. So he's very strict, but I think it's a very good point. And meditation, and it is a form of meditation, it is a form of cultivating a quality of mindfulness, of awareness, of a calm and inner stillness that is not falling asleep. It's not a time to take a nap. That is definitely a process of cultivating the mind in a posture where you can profoundly set the body at ease. So you have no discomforts or no struggle to sit in the right posture because you're profoundly loose, as if you're emulating a corpse after all. But that is a very good baseline for meditation, and the great masters of the yoga tradition centuries ago discovered this in rural India, when the population was 1/10, 1/20th of what it is now, and the pace of life so much smaller. Even then, the Shavasana was regarded as being a very, very important asana, as the segue between the asanas to the pranayama, on into the pratyahara, and on into the phases of dhyana and into samadhi eventually. And so even in rural India, with a much slower pace of life, the Shavasana was considered very important, and Iyengar really recognized that. If that was true in rural India 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, all the more so now. When you're living in Mumbai or Delhi, you're living in Kolkata, you're living in New York or Berlin or Paris, where the pace of life, we're being sensorily bombarded, the pace of life is so fast, the anxiety, the drivenness of it, the attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, which is almost characterizing civilization as a whole, the desperation, the anxiety that runs through so much of modern life. In the midst of that way of life and that quality of mind, to now say, well, okay, now just sit down and meditate. Well, naturally, for many people, they say, oh, meditate, and we contract, we clench up, we say, okay, now I'll try this, and the brow becomes furrowed. Okay, I'll try. Metaphorically or actually. Then we clench up, okay, I'll try to meditate. And we can simply drive ourselves more neurotic, more tight, more goal-driven, more frustrated, thinking, oh, what a terrible meditator am I. The Shavasana lays us out and says, first of all, just let go. Let go of all your hopes and your fears, your goals, your drivenness, your multitasking, your ADHD. Release it all. Settle down. Just be present with your body profoundly relaxed, your mind deeply at ease. And from that platform, then you may rise up and start meditating. But without that platform, you're bound to just bring in all of this rubbish from modernity, and that will only impair and clutter up your meditative practice. So I'm one of the few Buddhist meditation teachers who strongly emphasizes this. In fact, you find it in the teachings of the Buddha that he spoke of sitting, lying down, standing, and walking as all being legitimate postures for meditation. And walking meditation is common in the Theravada tradition and in Zen. Sitting is everywhere common. Hardly anybody in the Buddhist tradition teaches meditation in the supine position. But the Buddha himself indicated this was completely legitimate. It's strongly emphasized and taught with precision in the yoga tradition. And so I find this is especially appropriate and important for people living in the modern world. Again, whether it's Beijing or Ulaanbaatar or Rio de Janeiro. Very important in this phase of history. But it's also not only important while we're in the prime of life, relatively healthy, but if we consider that many of us will be getting sick, we will have sometimes sustained illness, and if we're fortunate enough, we'll get old. So we are facing, after we have been born, we are facing aging, we are facing sickness, and we are facing death. Should we have to stop our meditative practice as soon as we get ill, or as soon as we start to seriously age, or when we're facing death? That would immensely and tragically curtail the very meaning of meditation itself. As we get old, we may no longer have the ability to sit upright in a proper meditative posture for a sustained period. Now, we stop meditating. That would be ridiculous. And so already while in the prime of life, to learn how to meditate well in the supine position, then we're setting ourselves up so that we can meditate quite effectively, even on occasion when we get ill, we're bedridden, we're old, or even we're facing death. You say, all right, I'm going to die lying down, but I'm going to die meditatively, so I can die well as I hope I have lived well.